Welcome to the Delight Your Marriage podcast, the show where you hear from amazing and inspiring wives sharing their struggles, triumphs, and advice for this journey called marriage.
And I'm
Here's your
excited
host,
to bring you
Bella
another
Rose.
episode. This is part 3 of how to be easygoing, how to transform your marriage. So cool. I was on a clarity call just the other day with a wife, and she was so impressed with our conversation. I felt really grateful that she was willing to share bravely her story and her feelings and where she wants to go. But one thing she said, which I was so amazed at, is she said, you are extremely calm. You're probably the calmest person I've ever met. She said something along those lines, and I was taken aback and also extremely grateful, because I'm not sure anyone who knows me well would say that. I don't know. But I will also say, definitely, that could not be said of me years ago. I was very anxious and worried, concerned. But I will say that I have grown in this area in a huge way as a result of my marriage. And calm is the place we want to come into this world with, isn't it? We want to come from a place of being rested, refreshed, rejuvenated, don't we? That's when we can do our best work for God. So I encourage you to make your marriage easygoing, peaceful, so that ultimately you can do the best for God. Before we dive into the part 3 of that, I want to announce something pretty exciting, that my book, Delight Your Husband, The Christian Wife's Manual to Passion, Confidence, and Oral Sex, is right now on paperback. I'm holding it in my hand. People are already purchasing. Really exciting. It's on Amazon. You can get it now, and if you do go ahead and purchase and write a review on Amazon in the next, I think you've got 4 weeks from today, you'll be having free access to a $97 value masterclass where you can learn even more. So I encourage you to get on the train as soon as you can to really learn and master your confidence and your passion. And really, I take you by the hand, I take a wife by the hand to really understand yourself, how you feel about intimacy, walking you through that process, and then how he thinks about intimacy. What's his mind like in this area? And ultimately, how do you apply all of that into what I call penny or oral sex for him? Because a lot of men, most men actually crave that more even than intercourse. And I encourage you, that's actually a good thing, because it shows that you love him so, so deeply. So pick that up, Delight Your Husband. I'll have the link in the show notes. It is also on my website under resources. Awesome. Let's go ahead and dive in on today's session. So, we're at part 3 of how to be easygoing in your marriage. And if you listen to part 2, you'll hear a lot of the reasons why, and why my husband was so kind to share those things. And he has a lot of really good wisdom that I encourage you to go back and listen to. But here's a few just keys I want to talk about that I also want, if he doesn't mind, to comment on whatever he hears, and if he feels inspired, he's welcome to. We might have to do part 4 of this. But here are the things that I wrote that I think are really important. So one thing, and you know that my husband and I have kind of been laughing throughout these conversations, because something that's really important in our marriage is laughter and is playfulness. And, joy is a fruit of the Spirit, but also the joy of the Lord is our strength. It's a very important part of life that I think a lot of times people don't give enough credence to, but don't take yourself that seriously. Life, there's enough suffering and challenge in life. Don't let that be part of your marriage. Let it be fun and fluffy and a soft place to land. So here are some
things that I think people make mistakes on when they find things that undermine playfulness and safety in their marriage, but they think it's actually funny. So I want to just give you some guidance on what to take out of your marriage and what to insert to make it more fun, because you can only have fun when there's safety in your marriage. So one thing that takes out the safety a lot of times is sarcasm. You've got to be very careful with sarcasm because you can always be sarcastic, always. But, sarcasm comes with a price a lot of times. Certainly there are times that, anytime, generally, when somebody's being genuine and opening up, you can sarcastically respond. Does that invest in the safety of your marriage? No. It takes it out. It makes it so that it's not safe to open up. So when you recognize that someone's really revealing their heart, that is not the time to be sarcastic. It's the time to bite your tongue and meet them in that vulnerability and be there and be present. Don't be sarcastic and don't tease, because that's very important. When they have shown you their underbelly, the soft side of them, that's not the time to be teasing or sarcastic, because that's going to pull you guys farther apart. So you guys can be playful, but not a mean, teasing kind of playful. My husband and I play a pickup game of soccer about 3 times a week now, which is really fun if the weather's nice. And I recognized we played all winter long, actually, if you can believe it. These guys are hardcore. Every now and then I would miss one. But anyway, so the older gentlemen, which they're maybe like 35 to 60. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. But they are just kind of kind and playful with each other. So somebody misses the ball, they'll be like, Gigi, how did you miss the ball? They'll kind of do that. But then I noticed as the summer's coming, some of the younger guys are coming. And there were some young guys that were there in the winter, but in the summer now, there are some new young guys coming. And what I noticed those younger guys doing is teasing each other, but in a mean way. Like, what are you doing? Don't be scared of them. Go, how did you do that? Like this, just like angry. It's not a friendly kind of way. And there's lots of curse words. And come on, idiot. Like those are the kinds of things they're saying. And what I noticed, it actually changes the whole culture of the soccer game, because instead of like just kind of lighthearted playfulness, it's turned into this, okay, we are really serious about this, and if you don't get it perfect, you're going to be trampled on with harsh words. And at least that's what I sense, though I'm especially sensitive. My husband is less sensitive. Anyway, he was kind enough to talk to those young boys, and they have since curbed quite a lot of their language. So anyway, but that's one thing to be thinking about is, are your words investing in a positive culture in your marriage, or is it detracting? Is it causing things to be less playful and less fun for either of you? Because be thinking about, they might be more sensitive to you. And that doesn't mean you need to call it out and say, you need to toughen up. That was no big deal. Instead, you can recognize that's their strength. Sensitivity is a good thing because you're sensitive to you're intuitive, you're sensitive to the energies in the room, you're sensitive to somebody else's feelings. Those are good things, whether you're a man or a woman. Being sensitive is good. So keep that in mind. So those are some of the kind of guidelines just to be careful about, to invest in the playfulness and the fun in your marriage. So be very careful about sarcasm. Be very careful about teasing, and be playful but not mean. So one of the things that we do in terms of playfulness is, there's a lot of things that we do playfully, but one of the things, which is, he's actually much better at it than me, but is we'll do, what happened the other day? We were coming back from soccer. He had the goals in like a bag, and I was trying to get in the door, and he had the goals in the bag in front of me. So I'm like trying to walk around the goals, and he like kept putting the goals in front of me. And I think I tried 3 or 4 times to get around the goals, but he was doing it on purpose, but I thought it was an accident. And I was just trying to get around them. So anyway, and then, I laugh, but those are things like, those are experiences that you could get really angry about. But if you choose easygoing in your marriage, like that's actually a fun experience, even though I'm not as good as it. One time we were walking and we're talking about something, and he just keeps moving closer and closer to the wall as we're walking. It was like a wall outside. And yeah, eventually I realized as I like couldn't walk anymore that I... Okay, anyway. All right, so then that's playfulness. The next one is allow things not to be perfect in your home and with everything. So in our culture, regardless of where you live, you've got some kind of expectations of what perfection is. And, when people come to your house, or, when they see your kids wearing certain things, you have an expectation of what's perfection in your culture. And what I encourage you to do is be willing to not be perfect. Recognize that you and your spouse have your own culture in your own home, and you can establish whatever culture you want that to be. And so for my husband, he really cares about our kids not wearing perfect things. And for a while, that was really hard for me, because that was a huge value in my mom, was for us to really look presentable no matter where we were. And I think that came from a lot of like just trying to make sure that even though we had, challenges financially, she wanted to make sure that we looked like we didn't. So that was just something for her. So that's kind of an insecurity for me. But as over the years, I've allowed things to not be perfect. And I think that's really important for you to recognize, because one thing you're doing when you do that is you're inspiring others to be more authentic and be more of themselves. Because if you're pretending to be perfect, then they have the pressure to pretend to be perfect too. Do you see that? Because if you've got all your guards up of perfection, then they feel like they have to put their guards up of perfection. But once you start putting down your guards and start to be more vulnerable and like, okay, this is my authentic self, this is who we are, then they feel like they can bring their guards down and they can be who they are. One thing I really like is Jane Goodall's quote that she says, what you do matters. No, what you do makes a difference. So what kind of difference will you make? And I think that's important to be thinking about, is that your choices for your family and your home makes a difference to others when they see you, and they do see you. So how do you want to inspire them? How do you want to help them, encourage them, empower them, or not? And the next thing I wanted to mention was having certain priorities in your money. So we've talked about money just a little bit on this series, but I did want to kind of bring it up again, because how you spend your money is really how you're spending your life. Because money represents the hours that you have invested in receiving money back, right? Because those are hours of your life that you'll never see again. So then if you think about, you use that money on a new truck, then those however many hours you spent earning that money, let's say I can't even think of what the right amount would be based on your income, but if you think about how many hours does that represent, and you received a truck in return, is that an appropriate thing? Because here you are spending your life on a truck, right? Or is it better to spend those hours in something that's more important in your life instead of working so that you can have a truck? Does that make sense? So be aware that what you're spending your money on is actually what you're spending your life on. It is your life force. What you do with your money is your life. And then one thing for us that's really key in our having being easygoing, and that was really hard for me to give up, but was giving up the finances. My husband's in charge of the finances, and I think I've said it before on this podcast, but in one of my jobs, I was actually responsible for $1 million budget. And for me to give up all the spreadsheets and all the budgets and all this stuff to my husband was very hard. But I will say, in the midst of being responsible for our own finances, I was horrible at it. I was so stressed. It was such a burden. And I didn't want to make all those decisions and be responsible for the family. And at the same time, my husband felt powerless. He felt like he wasn't able to influence the direction of our family. And he didn't feel responsible for our family because I was making the money decisions. Even if we were, quote, kind of doing it together, really, I was in control. And so it wasn't until I said, you know what, honey, I can't do this anymore. I can't. It's too much for me. That was when he felt empowered to go ahead and be fully responsible. And so now he did a financial class, and we even facilitated the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace financial class for a while. But he took that, and also what else? And now he does it all, and he budgets and pays it all on time instead of me, who didn't pay things on time. And anyway, so he's amazing at that. So that was very important for us, is for him to have that power, because that was really important. The other thing is when I think for me as a woman, and honey, these are probably the last 4 points I have, and I'd love for you to comment. But for me, and I think this goes for men and women, but when there's an argument brewing, when it feels like there's some tension and something that seems to be going on, the first thing I assume is that it's me. Does that make sense? The first thing that I assume is I am having an internal problem. It's become a habit, which is really good, because then when I do feel like there's something going on, I can remove myself from the situation, journal, and try to get things a little bit more in perspective. When I get things on a journal and I write by hand what's going on and how I feel, then I can look at it a bit more objectively and have some space for my feelings to then see how to respond, and how to respond respectfully. Because one thing that my husband says a lot, which maybe he'll share if you don't mind, when he's in a soccer game, when he's watching a game, right? That's his passion and his love. When he'll notice that I'm upset, what will he do?
When you're upset?
Yeah.
I stop playing.
Mm-hmm. Like if you are watching it, yeah.
Oh, if I'm watching?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. If I'm watching something, a soccer, whatever, and I see if she's upset, I turn it off. Mm-hmm. I turn the whatever I'm watching off. And because I feel like if I have it on, makes me feel like I don't want to deal with whatever she's feeling upset. Because, even, we all have disagreements. Mm-hmm. And, me and my wife, we had some disagreements just like everyone else. And yeah, that's what I do. I turn it off. And it's funny that we have some friends that they say like nobody interrupt me because I'm watching this game live. So, and I was like, so what are you doing when you're watching a game? And I was like, well, I'm watching a game. But if my wife needs me or whatever, I turn it off. I can watch the replay later on, because I can the good things I can watch it later on because I'm not married to that stuff. So I can watch it later on. There's no problem with me. And I can feel and I can see that he felt uncomfortable. That he didn't want to hear that. And I said, like, why? Well, my wife is my family. Why would I do such a thing, like keep it on and just ignore it? Like, basically, I'm letting her know that whatever I'm watching is more important than her. Right? Is whatever important, it's what I'm watching more than her. And if you, husband or wife, feel this, if that happens, I'm sure you feel the same way, because you have something how you're feeling and you want to speak. You want it to be heard. And if that happens, you don't feel like that, and you feel more angry, and that you can ignore it. You can keep going. We all laugh about, forget about, but that stays there. And then when it happens again, that builds up. You add another thing, another negative stuff about your spouse, right? And keeps life going on again, and it keeps going. You added more stuff. And then there will be a time, because there will be a time that all that thing will come out. All those words that you wanted to say, you will say it out loud. And you're not want to say it on kindly and respectful way. You want to say on the opposite way, because you felt like you haven't been heard, and he or she pay attention more to this more than you. And when you're angry, you will feel this that tension, and then you will say those things.
Yeah, and I love that you said that, because it's similar to another point to make, is that in order to have a peaceful marriage, is you have to forgive each other over and over and over again. I mean, it doesn't matter how good you are in your marriage, there's going to be things that your spouse has to forgive you of. And just like you have to forgive your spouse of things. So that's going to be really, really important over and over and over again. What does Jesus say? When Peter said, how many times should we forgive others? 7 times? And Jesus says, no, 70 times 7. If Jesus forgives us, what does that, how much more are we supposed to forgive others? If we don't forgive others, how do we expect Jesus to forgive us? And my husband can tell you, I have trouble with that. There are times that I still struggle with forgiveness of others, and he has to just remind me, I thought you forgave that person. And I'm like, I thought I did too. And then it's a consistent kind of thing to be thinking about and to be giving over to Jesus. So now that I'm saying that, I'm thinking about the situation again, and I'm thinking about how I need to forgive them. Anyway, so that I'm making a note of, so I will come back to that and spend time with Jesus forgiving them and journaling about that. But the other thing I wanted to mention is also a really key part of your marriage is asking for forgiveness, saying you're sorry, and receiving the other person's request for forgiveness. Because if you don't accept their apology, then you're again adding to that culture of that it's not safe. It's not even safe to say you're sorry. If the person responds with an eye roll or, like a huff, you want it to be safe to say you're sorry, because then that's going to make them want to say they're sorry over and over again, because we have to say we're sorry over and over again. That's constant. You should be thinking about, oh my gosh, that probably hurt her. Oh my gosh, that probably hurt him. Let me say I'm sorry. So I think that's really important. So not only saying you're sorry, but also receiving the other person's sorry. So if my husband says, I'm sorry for something, I can be like, of course, honey, I forgive you. I know that you had a hard day or whatever. And that makes it easier for him to apologize in the future.
You're so kind.
So that's really important. So I think another one that I wanted to bring up is the humility. And of course, the apologizing to him is humbling, right? Because you're acknowledging that you did something wrong. It wasn't perfect what you did. And so you're apologizing for it. And that takes humility. It takes humbling yourself and saying, I'm sorry. I did something wrong. I hurt you. I'm sorry. I didn't want to make you feel like that. Even if you feel like the other person should be mature enough not to get hurt by that or shouldn't be as sensitive. Like, again, you're dealing with the person that you were have the privilege and the responsibility to respect and love and honor and cherish and support. That is, if you hurt them, if they feel hurt, then it's up to you to say, I'm sorry I hurt you. I didn't mean to do that. I was talking to someone recently and she was saying that, she has apologized for these things in the past, but she didn't understand the breadth of what was going on with her husband until now she does. And now she's like, okay, I actually do have to apologize again because now I actually understand. And that's a different level when you actually understand the hurt that you gave your spouse. Now it's different. So you need to apologize in that way for that thing. Another one that I think is important to talk about is having doubt that your way is the best way. A lot of people don't have that doubt, and they just assume that they are the best, and they cannot, they're infallible. And so what they do is they, require their spouse to be what they think is right. And the thing is, we need to walk with humility. And sometimes that means walking with some doubt that our way is the best way. I think a lot of people feel like it's a lack of faith to have an ounce of doubt in the way we see things or in the way we view things. The thing is that what I truly believe is if it's true, it's God's truth. So if something outside of our faith is happening and it doesn't make sense within the worldview of our faith as Christians, then there's something that we don't understand, but it's still something that God made. If it's happening, then somehow there's a explanation within what God created. So I say all that because what I think people do is they get so scared that something's outside of Christianity that they almost like put blinders on and pretend it's not even happening, or get angry that it's happening, or get angry that it's like I'm thinking about some spiritual things that happen that are not Christian things, right? So mediums that talk to the dead, or energy things, or whatever. Like I don't understand what's going on. But I do know that God made everything and he's aware of everything. So I don't know the reasons that's happening. I know there's a lot of Christians that kind of interpret that in certain ways, but I just recognize that I am not qualified enough to understand those things. So if you have differences of opinions with your own spouse, whatever it is, whether it's about things like that, or whether it's about things like understanding the nature of what trust means, or what what theology things are, or who's right about what, just recognize have some doubt. You might be wrong, and your spouse might be right. Being open to reason. And I love the scripture that says the wisdom from above is first of all pure, and then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And that's James 3:17. So I'd encourage you to meditate on that verse. If you guys are having trouble with strife and anger towards each other, think about, is your wisdom pure? And then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Especially if this is like what's wisdom and what's not, and you have a better opinion than the other person. Like, okay, fine. Are you open to reason? Are you being gentle? Are you peaceable? Because if that's not what's happening in the way you are being, quote, wise, then that's not true wisdom. It says, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And then it says, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So value peace. Okay, so I think I have exhausted what I wanted to tell you about being peaceful and easygoing in your marriage and how vital that is. Let me just go over all the things that I mentioned really quickly. Number 1, be playful. Number 2, extend the timeline. Number 3, rely on each other's strengths. Number 4, compliment and encourage each other. Number 5, gratitude. Number 6, be very careful about sarcasm and be very careful about teasing. And your playfulness shouldn't be mean. And then number 7, allow things not to be perfect. Number 9, think about and make sure that you're inspiring others to be more authentic. So you become more vulnerable and they become more vulnerable. Make your priorities and money more aligned with the culture of your family and what you want it to be according to God's will, not what you guys have just grown up with. Number 10, forgive each other over and over and over again. Say sorry over and over and over again. And then also receive sorry in a really wonderful, wonderful way. One thing I've told clients is, when Jesus told the parable of the father who had 2 sons, and one of the sons was extremely hurtful and asked the father to give him his inheritance early. So before the father was even dead, he asked him to give the son the inheritance as though he were dead. So it was really, really hurtful. And then the father gave the money and all the inheritance, and then the son went out and did horrible things. Debauchery, I think, is the word they say in the Bible. So that's like gambling and prostitution and just horrible things with the money, lost it all. And then he's like, I've got to do something. So he went to work feeding pigs, and he was so hungry that he started eating the food for the pigs. And then he was like, you know what? Even the servants in my father's house eat better than I do and live better than I do. So I'm going to go back to my father's house and beg for forgiveness and ask if I can just be a servant in his house. And the son was coming home. And when the father saw him a long way off, he got up and he ran to his son and embraced him in his arms. And he said, "Son, I'm so glad you're home." And he's going to make us feast. And he made this giant feast for his son, that my son was lost and now he's found. Like, just think about, that's the way the Father embraces us when we have just gone completely astray. And I encourage you and invite you to embrace your spouse when they have asked for forgiveness, even if it's this weak, awful, like, I'm sorry, and then rolled their eyes. Like, just embrace what their tiny hint of that, because that's going to grow the next time. That's an investment in the next time that they ask for forgiveness. So receive and gratefully receive the forgiveness that someone in your marriage, the spouse, asks for. The next one is assume it's an internal problem, first and foremost. So when emotions are raging within you, assume that it's your problem, because it is your problem. I mean, you're not even sure what's going on yet. You're just like, I'm angry or I'm upset. Like, okay, what is going on for you? Get a piece of paper out. What am I feeling? What's going on? What does this mean about me? What do I value? Like, those are questions you need to be sorting out before you ever come to your spouse and approach it in a respectful way. Another thing just for women is to track your cycles. My husband mentioned on the last podcast about how important it is for women, as they think about their, just the way God made us physically and hormones and all these things. Like, there are reasons that we'll have responses to things that are different than the way we normally would. So if you track your cycles, it's much easier for you to, this happened to me not too long ago, but when I recognized, like, oh, that's why, then I was able to give my husband a lot more grace. And it turns out the house was a mess, but it was not as big of a deal as I felt it was. And I got the whole place clean if he and the kids just left. And it was good that they did, because then I was able to clean the whole house and not be disrespectful. So anyway, so that's one thing I would encourage. And then, removing yourself from the situation. Like I said, avoid that. The next piece that I went over a little bit is walk with humility in your marriage. Be humble. That's a lot to do with the asking for forgiveness, apologizing a lot. And then the last one is having doubt. Be okay with the doubt in your heart and your mind, because that's going to be something that's actually going to support your marriage in being wise. And the last thing is check to make sure the quote wisdom that you feel is wisdom and your self-righteousness and all that kind of stuff. Make sure it's in line with God's word, which is the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Awesome. Thank you again so much for listening. And I hope that's been helpful and just kind of allowed you to be thinking through what you can do practically in your marriage to make it a bit more peaceful, a bit more playful, a bit more fun to be in. And that's what my prayer is for you. Father, in Jesus' name, I ask God that you would encourage and empower the listener on the other end, husband or wife, God, to be more easygoing in their marriage, Lord, and be willing to love the other person better, physically, spiritually, emotionally, God. And I thank you for that listener, and I look forward to more conversations together.
Thanks for listening. If you've been blessed by this, why not share it? Until next time, live with love, wisdom, and passion.